I just want to thank you all for being here. And I'm going to change my view so I don't get distracted by other things. Okay. I wrote a book. It was funny, but several months ago, I looked and I had 200 blog posts. I've actually been working on this for probably decades, but I looked and I saw 200 blog posts and I'm like, okay, there's something here. There's something here. I've got to look for it. So I did. And so I want to talk to you today about a few things in particular that really mean something to me and why I feel like this is a kind of a unique perspective and also an opportunity to reframe some of the things that have been happening to us. So I'd like to ask you this. How many of you know this voice? You're failing at food again. You have no discipline. I can't believe you did this again. You're never going to lose the weight. You can't do this. You're broken. I lived with that voice for decades. I used to hide wrappers in outside dumpsters so no one would see. I'd drive home, I'd have stop at the latest whatever, and I'd hide all the wrappers and I'd shove them down underneath. I'd even move another bag over it so no one could see what was in the dumpster. It started very young. I was 5 years old, twirling around in my most beautiful dress, and I just started kindergarten. And one little boy ran up to me and called me a whale. I spent 15 years in a verbally abusive marriage, and I say verbally because I did not get hit, but I got hit. And I found out later that verbal abuse is actually higher on the ACE scale than physical abuse, which is fascinating to me in a sick and twisted way. I tolerated it. I accepted some of it because I did feel fat and ugly. I gained over 100 pounds as protection to basically make sure that I stayed in the marriage. If I wasn't attractive, nobody was going to be looking at me. I cycled through, I don't even know, I probably lost 1,000 pounds in my lifetime. I'm pretty sure you understand what I'm talking about. But that interior voice kept telling me that I was weak, lazy, and out of control. How many of you can relate to that? Yeah. What if I told you, though, that voice might be missing something really important? I learned that from years and years of hard work. My grandfather told me we've got to beat ourselves to the grindstone. We've got to work really hard in order to succeed. And I always thought that working really hard also meant beating myself up. Let me tell you a little bit first about my path and why I want to make sure you hear that this is not an easy road, but it's an important road and a powerful road. When I was 50, I struggled mightily with breathing. I literally called 911 because I couldn't breathe. And I didn't know how long it was going to take them to get to me, and I wasn't sure I was going to live. That's bad. That's probably a really strong why. And what happened then was that I made some major changes to my food. I healed my gut lining. I spent an entire year abstaining from all sorts of things and focused specifically on this healing project. And I healed my gut lining. I healed it. But in the process, I didn't lose weight. I changed my food. I changed to a very healthy, uber fluffy woman, but I was still uber fluffy. I hadn't figured out all of the pieces yet. In November of 2016, I weighed 315 pounds. I know because I was at the doctor's office being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and high cholesterol. Yippee. I knew from my past experience that if I change my diet, because type 2 diabetes and high cholesterol are totally and directly related to food issues. We can probably figure that out. There are some genetic components to it, but basically I needed to change what I was eating. So I went vegan, low fat, low glycemic, and no grains to try to solve both problems. It didn't work on its own. My type 2 diabetes stayed the same. My high cholesterol actually went higher. I had lost about 50 pounds in that 6 months. But nothing changed in my numbers until I found Bright Line Eating, which deals with abstinence. And I'll just tell you, abstinence basically means abstaining from ultra-processed garbage. That's my very simplistic definition of it. But the other concept that was really important, because I had been, but it didn't change my numbers. But what did change my numbers was the 3 meals only and a copious amount of vegetables. I've never thought of weighing my food as a particularly lovely thing to do. But when you weigh your food and realize that you get to have way more vegetables, I weighed my food to make sure I got enough vegetables. But now I understand science. I understand why my type 2 diabetes didn't go down during the first program and why it went down in the second. I understand why my cholesterol went down. I also understand why abstinence is so powerful in helping us open up doors to all sorts of other things. In spite of the struggle that happens with that process, I released 170 pounds. I didn't think I could lose it anymore. As a matter of fact, I cut off and said, oh, 58. No. And that was when I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and high cholesterol. And I was just like, nope, I'm not. This isn't happening for me anymore. I'm not going to be able to lose the weight. I've done amazing things to heal myself, but I've never been able to lose the weight. Guess what? It happened. I continued research and study because of the abstinence brain is a very clear brain. I started to connect disparate dots because there's very little research actually done on food addiction. And I just want you to hear that sometimes that's a hard word to hear too. Words matter. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more too. But in spite of all of this, I've lost 1,000 pounds in my lifetime, but I've gained back more because I couldn't understand how to maintain it. And the maintaining is a fascinating piece that is all about this book. I discovered slowly over decades that my patterns around food weren't dysfunction, they were sophisticated adaptations. When I was hiding food, eating beyond hunger, using food as my constant companion, that wasn't weakness. That was my brilliant brain creating a reliable support system in an unreliable world. Food never judged me. Food was always available. It never left me. It was my most constant relationship, and frankly, it provided consistent, unconditional love, always. No matter what kind of issue was coming up for me, I always knew that this was going to make me feel better. Granted, we also know now that the connection between that making me feel better and the long term sucks. But my eating patterns weren't the problem. They were my solution to a much deeper issue. And that's a scary place to go. But understanding that this isn't your fault. It's your brain depleted of willpower, impossible to maintain discipline. It has finite and needs replenishing. It begins to help me shift things when I understand this. That piece in the Bright Line Eating book about willpower sent me on this trajectory. I don't even know how many books I've read, 70 or 80 books in the last 5 years, at least, along with tons of research, many classes I've taken. I've created a huge body of work that makes sense to me. I've connected dots around alcoholism, and I've connected issues around drug addiction and the reasons why we go where we go. And when I realized there was so much more going on inside our heads, when I noticed that the voice in my head that wanted food was still there, but was somehow impotent, I recognized that I had managed to turn down the noise. If you can release one thing today, if you can remember one thing today, you're not going to ever stop wanting food. But it does not have to be the major want. It does not have to be your solution. It does not have to be the reason you go. It does not have to be your coping mechanism. And that's what it is. It's not an evil thing. It's just a substance that we have used. And frankly, I would prefer to have gone to food than some of the other substances that I suppose I could have gone to if I wasn't such a good girl. What we've been missing is this approach of that focuses, a diet focuses on what we eat, when you eat, and how much you eat. But it never asks the deeper question about why your system turns to food in the first place. What drives you to food isn't hunger. We all know this. I have talked to so many people. I still work with many people who are taking the drug and still need to meet with me because they have not solved the issue of going to food. But they're working on it. They're turning down the noise. This is not the reason that we go to food because we are hungry. It's many other things. Every time that we go to food, we need to understand that our brain isn't randomly deciding to eat. It turns to food for very specific, sophisticated reasons that have nothing to do with nutrition and everything to do with survival, connection, and coping. Until we understand these underlying drivers, we're just managing symptoms. That's what a diet is, giving us a structure for a time. So I'd like to ask you if you've ever heard of something called alarmed aloneness. I don't know what's going on in your mind when you think of those two words together, but I would imagine you're flashing on something where you felt very alone. You can feel alarmed aloneness in a huge group of people. You can feel it here right now. You can feel it in the middle of the night. You can feel it in any number of circumstances where you don't feel like anybody around you understands. Alarmed aloneness is something that Sarah Payton introduced me to, Peyton. She's done a ton of work on alarmed aloneness, resonance, or unconscious contracts. She does a lot of work that helps get to the underlying issues and dissipate them. Alarmed aloneness needs resonance and accompaniment in order. We need to feel accompanied. So the definition of alarmed aloneness: when you're activated, stressed, overwhelmed, or anxious, and alone with that activation. Either no witness, no support, or no accompaniment, but you also don't have anyone you can share it with that will understand. Even in a community of people that have issues with food, there's an awful lot of advice. And that advice may be incredibly helpful. But let me just explain what that advice does. Alarmed aloneness is the concept that I need to keep this safe and I need to keep this close. The people around me are not safe for whatever reason. Advice giving is a beautiful thing, but it does give us the sense that we're not in the right place where we are. I'm sure you've had a circumstance where you've grieved over something or been upset about something and someone said, it'll be fine tomorrow. Or, aren't you over this by now? That is not helpful. It also dismisses where you are and you have a right to feel what you're feeling. That's the point of alarmed aloneness, is that you're sitting in this space and nobody feels like I deserve to be in this space. I deserve to feel sad. I deserve to be upset. I deserve to be angry. And guess what we do when we feel alarmed aloneness? We eat. We're comforted. Your nervous system seeks the most reliable source of comfort available. Food has been there when you were lonely as a child, when you felt pressure you couldn't discuss, when you experienced pain you couldn't share. The concept starts early. If you think about a new child, a new baby, and the difference in what's going on for that new child. So they have two things that they care about: attachment and authenticity. Attachment is extremely important. We need to have the comfort and love of our parents. We need to feel that our needs are being met. A baby is a baby for how many years? And we need to have someone taking care of us. So we have this concept of being authentic. And if we end up as a child being too loud or too funny or too much or too overwhelmed or too tired or too hungry, any number of things can cause us to feel like, oh, they're mad at me. I better change. And so we end up removing the part of us that is our authentic self and moving to attachment. And so we make changes to ourselves. I like to think of this as us building and putting on our armor to protect us and to keep us from being hurt and being kicked out of community. It's a basic survival mechanism. And so if you think about how many different ways you've changed and how many different ways you acquiesce, every time you do that, you're feeling that alarmed aloneness, you're feeling that lack of attachment. And in order to stay attached, you'll make changes. Unlike alcohol or drugs, you can't abstain from food entirely. Just to remind you of that. The interesting part is that we live in a culture where it's expected to push these ultra-processed substances on us. At birthday parties, celebrations, grief. You're surrounded by engineered products, right? Designed to override your natural signals. There's an actual study that was done about why we develop extra room for dessert. It's ridiculous. It has nothing to do with our physiological need. There are things that we put in our mouths to nurture our cells, and there are things that we put in our mouths to nurture our soul. The crucial distinction, Susan has used this phrase. I don't know if it's used elsewhere. Susan with Bright Line Eating, she uses the phrase, not my food. It's basically stating that there are certain foods that aren't mine. I find that phrase horrible for me. I changed it to not food. Now, I do have a sophisticated system. I can't eat gluten. I can't eat tomatoes. I can't eat potatoes because they mess with my joints. Grains bloat me. I was allergic to the planet growing up. So I've got this extra issue that it has both saved me and also made me very sad. But there are certain foods that are just not food. And if I change my phraseology on this, instead of saying not my food to not food, that doesn't mean you're not going to consume it. It just means that you understand the distinction. It's like an alcoholic distinguishing between alcohol and tea. It's the same thing. These certain substances are challenging for me. Even if you don't consider yourself an addict, you don't need to call yourself an addict. An addict was someone that wasn't me, until I realized that this substance was really challenging for me and it was hurting me. So I guess it doesn't matter if you call yourself an addict. The fact is that substance is not healthy for you. And it also causes me to spiral in ways that I don't like. So if you think about it instead as not food, to me, it makes a huge difference. There's a whole chapter in my book called What If Treat Actually Treated You? I went to Pixabay as a place where you can get images for things. And I went to Pixabay and put in the word treat. There was not a single swing set or a single roller coaster or a single kayak race on that all the image, every single one of them was some ridiculous confectionery. Our society treats as some sort of an ultra processed garbage, and there's a reason for that. There is scientific evidence of what's going on in our bodies when we consume that stuff. It's a major hit, and it's a perfect coping mechanism. I just want you to hear how brilliant you've been in choosing a substance that not only is brilliant at solving the problem in the moment, but it's also socially acceptable until they look at your cart. And then there's judgment. Or look at your sleeve. And then there's judgment. Your food issues are part of an intricate, intelligent system solving multiple problems simultaneously. This is why it is so complicated to release food. I know you understand what the sound of an orchestra tuning up is, but it only lasts maybe a minute. Our orchestra is tuning up all the time. Anytime you have emotional regulation when overwhelmed, guess what? You're going to go to food. You need to calm yourself down so that you can get this job finished. You're not sure how to address this issue with your significant other, so you go to food. It calms you in the moment. It solves a purpose. It's self-soothing when under-resourced. It relaxes you. It's rebellion. How many of you start a program and are like, my rebel got too loud? When that rigidity feels threatened. It's connection when isolated. There's a huge amount of consistent, unconditional love that comes from that substance. It does the same thing every time, never disappoints. And it provides pleasure when life feels joyless. Each eating episode might be serving 3 or 4 of these functions at once. Traditional approaches that only address hunger miss the sophisticated intelligence, or they keep you on this rigid plan so you can't even consider how I'm supposed to break this and change the way I work. I have a beautiful 2 or 3 chapters on how this rigidity of the diet, and I don't want you to tell me that's the only way I'm staying here. I want you to, what do I want to say? How do I want to put this? I want you to suspend how you're thinking about food plans for a minute or two, long enough to get through a couple of chapters, to understand what is actually going on here and how you can shift this. Our greatest capability is here, our prefrontal cortex. That is our executive function. It is the thing that made you the most amazing professional, whatever, the most amazing mom, the most amazing whatever. That is using your prefrontal cortex. It is completely offline when you're triggered. Think about that. You don't have the resource of using your executive function when you're triggered. You use your executive function for work. I managed an entire section of Southern California's Verizon's grid, their microwave grid and fiber grid down in Southern California for telecommunications. I was paid a shit ton of money to be an incredibly intelligent, multitasking fiend. I could not have done that if I was constantly in my lizard brain. Food saved me and got me to the place I was. I didn't know it at the time, but food helped me refocus. There are other ways that you can help refocus. And I'm telling you, if you are good at anything, the fact that you struggle with food has absolutely nothing to do with your capabilities and everything to do with the underlying reasons that you're going there. And that's what we're going to uncover. This is designed to be an accompaniment to anything that works for you already, if that makes any sense. I am not suggesting any particular food plan, although I have some definite ideas on how to make a food plan important for you and how to make a food plan help you and work for you. I know that some of the underlying reasons that we beat ourselves up are because we don't know any other way. When you're in alarmed aloneness, your nervous system triggers primitive survival responses, as I mentioned. When you feel alone, my daughter was just telling me yesterday was a big day. The dog that had kept her comforted during her entire brain surgery and all the recovery and all the crap that was associated with it. Yesterday was Little's passing day. I don't know what that's called. There's maybe a name for it. But she was thinking a lot about, and she felt very alone. It triggers an emotional response. Our prefrontal cortex goes offline. There's another reason why. This is a fascinating one. We need to conserve energy when our brains think that we're in some sort of lion chasing episode. And that's what every single threat feels like to our brains. Our brain can't distinguish that it's an internal or an external threat. And if you have an internal threat at work, the chances of your amygdala going off are very small, because an internal threat means, oh, I've got to fix this. I've got to call this contractor and I've got to deal with this issue. And oh, this tower is offline. So I've got to make sure that my prefrontal cortex does not go offline during those situations. And you can learn how to get your prefrontal cortex back online more quickly and stay online, so that you can make concerted efforts and decisions based on all of your faculties, based on your executive function. Am I really hungry right now? That's really interesting. I'm needing food right now. What is that all about? I want to grab this thing. I wonder what that's all about. That pause is everything. That pause shifts you back in thought, in curiosity, and back into your entire brain. That's all. The pause. That's it. Learning what to do next is part of the process. Was it Nurse Ratched who was the really brutal, awful nurse in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? I felt like I had Nurse Ratched in my head. Now, she might be beating people into submission. She might be moving people in a direction that she felt was healthier for everyone concerned. But it wasn't healthy for me. And I would certainly never speak that way to anyone else. I know you guys have heard this until the cows come home, that the way we talk to ourselves is wrong. But it's really hard to shift. And sometimes we don't even notice we're doing it. So I just want you to hear that there are multiple reasons that you do what you do. And if I can be ironic here for just a minute, I don't want you to beat yourself up for beating yourself up. Give yourself some grace That this has worked up until now, maybe not for your food or your weight issues, but it has worked to get you to where you are today. You're here and you're thinking about something that is pretty, this is a pretty deep topic. This whole concept that I've pulled together. I am not assuming that you're stupid. I'm assuming that you're understanding what I'm saying and that this is complicated. It's extremely complicated. The entire concept of dieting is a fascinating one. And it's one of the main reasons I decided to get this out there now rather than wait for it to be published in hardcover. I honestly don't care if it ever gets published in hardcover. I really do like the digital format for my own purposes. Andrew Huberman's someone that I follow pretty closely, and he was supposed to have a book out in September. Now, he was supposed to have a book out, I think, this Tuesday. He's pushed it back a year because there's all this new science. I said, look, I know there's new science. As a matter of fact, there's three or four new additions to the bonus materials in the book that I've added post-production, if you will. I'm not changing a thing in the book itself, but I'm adding as needed. And I'm also evaluating what I've done already and to see if there's any changes, to see if there's any new science. There's a new book coming out on Tuesday called Food Intelligence. And it talks about the history of The Biggest Loser and the concept of metabolism. And the interesting part is metabolism doesn't play a very big part in weight loss. There are way too many factors, but I'm real curious because every talk I've heard her talk about, even though she has a food issue herself, has not talked about the underlying reasons we go to food, which is what this book is about. The underlying issues that might plague you. I'm not saying everyone is in the same boat. There are some things in this book that are stronger for me than others. Every single one of these chapters could be a standalone and could take some time for you to digest and understand, and no pun intended on the food issues and the food digestion. But most diets focus on accountability without resonance, frankly. When I first started Bright Line Eating, there was an awful lot of discussion in the boot camps. At that point, I was in Homestead House. Some of my best buddies have come from there. But the interesting thing was, as I learned more about resonance in particular, I recognized the pullback and the pushback that some people have about this. Advice is a real challenge. And if you get accountability, if someone says to you, can you please be my accountability buddy because I don't trust myself right now? I need someone to approve my changes to my food plan. I understand the concept and I think it's a very important step in the process. But at some point, we need to be able to read what's going on here and understand what's happening here. And instead of accountability, we need accompaniment. We need people that are walking with us who can resonate with us in the moment so that we don't have to go to food. Food is our resonance until we find someone else who is going to give us some comfort in the moment. I have a right to be upset at this, that, or the other. I have a whining buddy, and that's not a W-I-N-E, it's a W-H-I-N-E. I have a whining buddy. It really helps me to get some of this stuff out. Patricia, my teaching cohort, calls it first voice. I know we understand what first voice means. We can hear it in our heads. And sometimes we think, oh my God, I'm a horrible person for thinking that. There are a ton of reasons that I won't go into right now about first voice, but first voice is the thing. And we need to be able to be accompanied in those moments. I need to know that there's something. I just met with my mastermind group this morning. We've been meeting for 8 years. There is something to be said for being able to just spew, just say the things you need to say. But our society is so big and so much on looks and feeling this need to be a certain look and a certain way. Imposter syndrome much? Wear a mask much? So these diets, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. I have a very specific food plan that I follow, that I shift every now and then, that makes sense for me, that I've worked on. It's not at all the same food plan I started with in my abstinence journey. I've made some adjustments for all sorts of reasons. And I don't even want to go into that today. If you want to ask me more about what I do and what I eat, happy to share it with you, but that's not what this is about. This is about how meal plans without emotional support create a circumstance where you're more likely to go off plan. I don't know how many friends I have that don't call when they're eating. We don't want to tell people. It's embarrassing. It's shame ridden. But if we can look at the underlying reasons that we went there, that's what we want to do. Let me ask you this. If you lost your car keys, would you forever allocate those car keys to someone else? I can't be trusted with these car keys. I need you to hold on to them, and I will ask for them whenever I need them. You're not learning anything. I'm super clear. My car keys go right here in this little cubby right here. I'm super clear about that because I've learned through trial and error. I need you to look back at the last time that you ate. It could have been right before this call. I need you to look back at the last time that you ate something that you knew wasn't needed or necessary or helpful for you physically. And I want you to look at that, look back a little bit further and look back a little bit further and see what's going on. Have I had any support this week? Have I said yes way too many times? Have I created an environment where there's no way that I'm not going to be exhausted? Have I gotten enough sleep? Have I had any movement? Have I done any self-care? The odds are no and no, or maybe yes to I said yes too many times. This is sophisticated stuff, and it deserves a sophisticated approach. It honors your complexity. And that's why I'm not going to give you a gummy that's going to help you lose 60 pounds in 30 days. Okay? First of all, I don't recommend gummies, but that's another story. The approach that I know that has been helpful to the hundreds of people that I've been working with is the concept of looking at the holistic look and giving myself grace and compassion. And that is not easy to do, especially when you're looking in the mirror or looking on the scale or watching yourself eat. These are coping mechanisms. The goal isn't to eliminate your coping mechanism, which is what you're doing when you're going on a diet. It's to understand why you need those coping mechanisms and to gradually shift to another kind of coping mechanism that is healthier for you. I can't believe I've actually done it. I have been thinking about writing. I'm getting teary-eyed thinking about it. I have been thinking about writing a book since I was 3 years old. And I can say that I've probably written several books. I've been reading since I was 3. Yes, I know that's pretty early. My mother just got me scholastic detective books and I read them cover to cover voraciously. And that's the other thing that I used to be so embarrassed about. I used to be really embarrassed that my favorite genre was detective fiction. I used to be so embarrassed about that because it wasn't the classics. I wasn't here reading, I don't know. For some reason, Sense and Sensibility was okay, but Hercule Poirot wasn't. I don't know. Anyway, I spent a long time recognizing that was a thing that I needed to relax about. But I've always loved writing. And the other interesting part is that I lived in a family of incredibly creative people. My mother was an opera singer, incredible voice. My father was a choreographer and a ballet dancer, incredible dancer. He also sang. My grandmother was a china painter. I have her. She painted this for me when I was born. I was also her only granddaughter, so I'm sure I wasn't spoiled at all. But I was surrounded by all these creative people. I didn't think I could draw. I definitely didn't have the long neck. I was 5'3" on a good day. Frankly, the doctor's office says I'm 5'2" and 3/4 now. I was not a 5'10" long-limbed ballerina. I did not have my mother's vocal cords. I do love to sing, but I didn't have her operatic voice. So I couldn't draw, I couldn't dance, and I couldn't sing. So I thought, I guess I'll just study. So I became very good at getting A's. Very good. That was how I made my mom's life easier. That was how the way that I identified and became worthy was by how high my score was. Which is probably why I was a crystal vaser and led 17 Guinean games. There was probably a reason for that. I was definitely a high achiever. So I can really relate to rigidly gripping the steering wheel and doing everything right. I didn't have that rebel part that some people talk about. My indulger basically shifted early on and decided, oh my gosh, don't listen, don't smell that, don't smell that, don't look, turn your head. My indulger was very helpful. My indulger wanted me to go to other things. And so I made several trips to Disneyland. My book, I've titled Thinking Outside the Box, A Revolutionary Approach to Food Dysfunction. I've thought a lot about this title, a lot about this title. I have become a master reframer. I love looking at things differently. I think that's where my natural or maybe learned approach to detecting came from. I love looking at things from different perspectives and questioning whether or not that is really true. Is what I believe about my own self that I can't lose weight anymore at 58 years old, is that really true? I wanted to understand the underlying drivers, the underlying reasons I went to food, especially when I found out willpower was a thing in my brain. Oh my God. This book contains everything so far that I've learned about food. Why your patterns are intelligent adaptations, not personal failures. How to transform alarmed aloneness into accompanied difficulty. The difference between restriction and discernment. Cue in sacred boundaries rather than rigid rules. Creating sustainable change by working with your system. You don't need to fight upstream for this. This does not have to be hard. My father disclosed something to me in his last couple of months that happened to him when he was a little boy that probably shaped his life, probably caused his alcoholism, probably created his distancing from all of us. And I had to hold that. He didn't want me to share it with anyone. I finally encouraged him on his last days to tell my brothers because I thought they needed to know. That was 2.5 years ago. I had been abstinent since November of 2016. So I had been abstinent for 6 or 7 years. I left the hospital after that Zoom call, and I wanted desperately to help them somehow. And I didn't know. I didn't know how to help them. You can tell this is still a big deal, and it's still something I'm still processing. But the thing I didn't do, I noticed it. I'm one of those people that when they drive, they want to pull in somewhere. I'm sure you don't understand that. I'm sure you don't relate to that at all. But I was driving home from the hospital and I wanted to pull in to a fast food restaurant. And I thought, wow, I haven't had that thought in a long time. The fact that I thought about the thought and that I got curious about it, and that I also noticed something else. I want to use this word and I want you to recognize its importance. My reaction was impotent in comparison to what it used to be. It used to be uncontrollable. I didn't have any control over it. I didn't even think about it. I just did it. But this time, in spite of all of this, I was my dad's medical power of attorney. I had to tell his doctor that, yes, in fact, he does have a huge drinking problem. He just happened to not note it on his forms to make sure they understood all of the parameters. This is the turning down of the volume. There's still dissonance. There's still times when I feel like this huge pull. We will. Let that go. That's going to stop. Think about that one. If you let that go, just imagine how much more space you'll have. Instead of trying to fight that noise, go to the curiosity of it. I wonder why I'm feeling this way right now. What's happening right now? Why is this a thing? I know I'm not hungry. I just had lunch an hour and a half ago. Why am I feeling this way? When you can recognize that this is a pull, even if you don't stop yourself, you have an opportunity to reflect on it. This is an opportunity to not lose your keys again. You don't need to go to someone else for validation unless you're going to them for accompaniment. The diet program and the diet industry doesn't understand this part. There's all this new science. It just came out right before I had to explode the book out. I had to. because of all this new science around the rigidity of diets and why there's a problem with them and why there's this psychological issue around neuroplasticity. I know you've heard that. I haven't said that word yet, but we are capable of learning, even at this old lady advanced stage. And I know there's a few of you that are older than me. I'm 66. I did not think at 58 I would ever lose this weight. I now know I'm not going to gain it back. I now know I have the capacity to understand, and I am not expecting that noise to turn down, other than I'm not going to answer the call. I don't need to. I am so grateful for these substances because they are giving me the neon sign that I need to find the solutions and to shift, to find an alternative coping mechanism. And even that phrase is a challenge for me. Coming up, being raised as an independent woman, as an independent girl, I didn't like the idea that I had to have a coping mechanism. I didn't like that. But you could also think of it as improving your balance. All work and no play makes something a dull girl. I forget I'm always mixing those things up. But you understand what I'm saying. We do need balance. We do need relaxing. We do need play. We do need sleep. If you find yourself wanting to sleep desperately when you've got this big project going, guess what? You haven't done enough self-care to get to the place where you can actually work hard on your project. Our bodies know way before we do. And that's what this book is about. Chapter 1 for me is a beautiful explanation for why we need to reframe. Can you imagine food dysfunction being a gift for you? When you understand that your relationship with food has been one long, intelligent attempt to take care of yourself, everything else becomes possible. Chapter 2 is on resonance. Chapter 2.5, because I'd already written and recorded 5 chapters, but I got this new stuff and I had to add it in. I'm sorry. I promise I've stopped. No more ads, other than at the back end. There's 3 or 4 new posts that I put in at the back end that I'm calling bonus materials. But 2.5 lists all these different physiological and emotional and psychological and biological and neurological reasons we go to food. It's crazy to me. And it could feel exhausting, but it can also feel liberating. I just thought willpower was the thing. No, there's a whole lot more. There's a whole lot more. Chapter 3 talks about why the brain does what it does in dieting and why it doesn't learn. I'm not saying you don't learn things. You are never back at square one. I'm not saying that every diet doesn't teach you something. They're just not effective because of the parameters and the structure. And it's the problem because get this thing going with this structure and you end up with sorry, I don't know how to turn off the chat thread for myself, but I am highly sensitive and I'm extremely sensitive to what's going on. Even though my left ear doesn't work, I'm extremely sensitive to sound and noise and visuals. I just want you to hear that this is a complicated process and diets are very rigid in their rules and in their structure for a reason. Because it's learning how to bowl with the bumpers. You'll always hit the pin. But what happens when you take the bumpers off? What happens when you go on vacation? What happens when, when your dad's dying and your mom's dying and everybody's calling you all the time? What happens when that happens? That's why it's so complicated. And if you take nothing else away from this, it's not your fault. It's biology. Chapter 4 is about shame and why shame blocks natural learning. Chapter 5 is about your internal guidance that supports rather than attacks. Chapter 6, how your original programming impacts things. I grew up extremely independent. I had to be. I had to make my own choices. I had to make my own rules. I didn't feel like mom could do anything for me. I didn't want to ask for help. I'm sure none of you understand that one. But you have unique wiring from childhood. The next chapter is on tigers in the kitchen. Why your nervous system treats food like survival threats. The next chapter is on when life gets messy and how stress and trauma affect your relationship with food. Part 4 is all about unique systems, your beautiful, complicated wiring, appreciating your specific coping mechanisms. I've got several quizzes that are available to you that might help you narrow down some things to where to start. Becoming your own early warning system, developing internal awareness in advance of, or maybe after the fact, but stop getting, oh, tomorrow's another day. Stop that. Look back, not with regret, but with reflection. Look back on why you did what you did so that you'll learn where to put your keys. The next chapter is how our food struggles can contain wisdom. Chock full, no pun intended. Part 5 is all about reframing. Understanding the superpower of reframing, being able to look at transforming your narrative, changing the way you talk about things, changing the verbiage. The next chapter is on social triggers. My grandmother was my first drug pusher, God bless her. The next chapter I mentioned already, what if treat actually treated you well? How to deal with the things that happened for us and how to shift. How many times in our childhood did we go for this or that as some sort of a soothing or a celebration? The next chapter is what happens when you stop fighting yourself, the magic of not trying so hard. And then your personal history and life mastery, reframing this process so you can empower yourself. The next section is on releasing old patterns. The control trap. That's a good one. I really struggle with this one. I don't know how many ways I try to control a situation, but I'm very aware of them. Doesn't mean I'm changing them. Bless me, I really do being in charge. I do. But why trying hard keeps you stuck? And the compassionate return, getting back up without self-attack. It feels counterintuitive. I'm hearing my grandpa's voice saying, yeah, but if you're not punished for doing something bad, you'll do it again. I disagree. The doing it is punishment itself. You're not going to want to do it again. That's what you're trying. That's why you're all here. The last section is on the messy middle of change and why progress never looks linear. You can go for years being abstinent and still struggle. One of my favorite things is to look at exchanging one prison for another. That's how it felt for me as a crystal baser, is to be in prison. I struggled with going on vacation. I struggled with going to visit friends. I struggled with going out to eat. I struggled with anything where I wasn't carrying my scale. Being the leader of 17 Gideon games, anybody that knows anything about bright line eating knows there's a lot of pressure. I have an entire section on one of my favorite topics, which is front load joy and allowing fear to ride shotgun so that you, joy, can drive the bus. And my last chapter is on not doing this alone. Being in a community of supportive people, being in a community that gives you accompaniment. This isn't about following another food plan. I think whatever you're doing right now is important awareness. This isn't about more discipline. This isn't about restricting yourself harder or fixing what's wrong with you. Lucy's come to visit. This is about understanding the underlying drivers that no one talks about and working with your system. This is about building self-compassion with an understanding of why it's created and why it's important to be self-compassionate about something that we have always beat ourselves up about. And this is about creating sustainable transformation from the inside out. I want to show you where this book is because it's not in the normal spot. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. If I can get to the right stuff here. My book is online on my website, transformwithsonia.com. And once you've purchased the book, you'll have access to all of the materials. Okay. Share my screen. If you go to my website, transformwithsonia.com, you'll find the book on the front page. And by the way, Sonia is spelled with a J. And there's more information here. And there are two choices now. I have, sorry to make you dizzy. It is not $97. It's $47. There's a coupon, reframe. Please use it. And that gives you not only access to all of the content, but it also gives you access to the new content that comes out regularly. Like I said, I just launched this a couple of weeks ago, and I've already put up 3 or 4 new things. So I want to go to the top of the screen here is login. And you use the password, the login that you use to purchase, and the password comes with it. And you scroll down to the course. I've got several. If you have purchased a course already, all your courses are here. But here's the start of the book. The table of contents is here, explaining all of the things about all the different. Chapter 1 is here in part 2. 1, 2, 3, 2B, 3, 4, and 5. Sorry, I still giggle at myself for 2B. To be or not to be, I don't know. And as you can see, these different chapters go down. Part 3 is the science. You can look at these individually. Let me just show you what you get in each of these chapters. Let's go to chapter 1 here. You can either watch me read it, or you can read the book here. Each chapter is here. Sorry, my cat is really not wanting to go away. That's the book for the first chapter. Or you can download the book. The chapter content is here. This is available, and here's I don't know if I'm sharing with sound, so I'm not sure you can hear me as well. But here I'm reading it.
Food Dysfunction.
The other option is you can listen to it on audio. And all the audio is here. Each one of the chapters. And you can speed it up, you can slow it down, and it also has the digital component. I have been hosting book clubs forever. And I've always felt that reading and hearing was the most rich way to listen to a book. And so that's what I've provided for you. And now you get to see me read it with all my cute little expressions as well. And the audio version is also available on there. So it does have the digital copy as well. And I have already gotten amazing responses from people. So I'm just curious if you want to click on that link and use the coupon code reframe for the full book. Like I said, there's multiple things. I should show you the bonus material. My cat is really right here. Bonus content. There are understanding your 2 food processing systems. This is brand new, a week and a half ago. Food intelligence, this book, this is the initial launch stuff. I'll be adding more to this after the book comes out on Tuesday. This is a complete list of all the books that I've read so far in my cute little journey of particularly the last 5 years. And this is a really interesting perspective on the conscious mind that I thought was worth paying attention to. So there will be bonus content continuing out. It will not be added to the main part of the book, but you will always be able to go here and find new. And I'll occasionally notify you if it's something that I think is revolutionary. That's it. That's my book. Are there any questions?
Sonia, was there something where you talked about the price was listed, and then to the right of that, there was something about $19 or?
That's just for the audio and the digital. There is a component where you can just buy the audio. But you will not get any new content. I just added that to give people an option to try it. I will be giving you an option to upgrade because I do think that this is a never-ending story. I think it's really important to recognize that we are going to be learning new things, especially about food dysfunction. It's crazy to me how little has been actually studied. Most of the research I've done has been with alcoholism, drug addiction. Gabor Mate has done a ton of work with drug addiction. And he talks a lot about accompaniment versus attachment and how, as children, we make the choice and we have to stay accompanied. So we will, I'm sorry, we have to stay attached. So he will, authenticity and attachment. He is certain that this was an incredibly wise coping mechanism that drug addicts took. And I see that absolutely with the same thing for our food. There are certain foods that gave me such respite. I would spend 20 minutes in solace and comfort, and I would be as if I was on top of a mountain and I didn't hear any noise around me. That was a gift. I didn't have any other way to figure it out until I recognized, oh, wait a minute, I get that when I go out in my woods. I get that same solace because the sound is different, right? When you're in the woods than when you're in the house, and you can't, I suppose you could look at your email, but the whole point of getting out there is to separate yourself from those things. And it is my new mecca that some foods still provided that wonderful hit for me until they didn't, until I recognized I can find other things. Now, there's a lot of science around the dopamine hit that we get from this food. It is a brilliant mechanism. It is a brilliant substance. A hug gives you a 20-second hug gives you a wonderful happy hormone hit. An accomplishment gives you a wonderful happy hormone hit. It's not the same, but it's more sustainable. So the more that you're aware of what it is that's giving you and grateful for that hit, the more it stays with you, because that gratitude in itself amplifies whatever happy hormone hit you're giving yourself. Does that make sense? Yeah. We've used food for everything for a very long time. And when we remove it, we need to replace it with something else. But it helps to understand what it has been doing for us. And that's what my book is about. Yeah, Denise and I are not too far apart. She wants to give me a hug. Just far enough away, you and I busy girls.
I just want to acknowledge that I got the book and it has been helping me so much because my perfectionistic part really acts out when I'm not perfect. And this has changed my thinking as far as not only why I've done what I've done, but also being grateful for that part that really saved me in a lot of cases and helped me cope. And it's just really helping me. And I listen to it over and over again because after 62 years of doing things a certain way, it takes more than just once to change. And then also the resonance I get with your group is just, it's amazing. It's exactly what I needed. It was the next step of my journey to continue on because, like you, I've gained and lost a lot of weight, but I've never been able to keep it off before. And I want to keep it off this time. So thank you for creating this and all the work that you've done. You're amazing. And I love you. And Lucy too. Hi, Lucy.
I know. Yeah, she's something else. Thank you all. I really appreciate your time today. I know that Saturdays are sometimes our respite days, and this may have stirred some things for you. I just want to honor that. There's a lot that I've brought up and a lot that to digest. Again, no pun intended. Okay, maybe a pun intended. There's a lot to digest, and it's good work, and it's important because you matter, and your perspective on all of this matters. The struggles, they don't need to happen anymore. The struggles can go away. We can be left with just an awareness and a wondering. Yep, always a pun intended. Absolutely. Thank you all. It's good to see you.